What's up, y'all? Today we're going to be breaking down one of the coolest graphics I've made in a while. I love how it turned out. It's the first thing I've done in the wrestling realm, so let's get into it and break it down. So the beginning piece was this background piece that I found online. I love it. Looks like 3D. Love the neon lights. And immediately got me hype about the graphics. So I used a hue saturation layer to tweak the colors and basically make it black and yellow. So the way you do that, take a hue saturation layer, go to the blues, turn the saturation all the way down, and then you're just gonna kind of drag that out, this slider down here, over all of the bluish areas, maybe even into the greens a little bit, even into the pinks a little bit. Then we're going to take the magentas and tweak them, be a little more red. Then we're going to tweak the reds to be a little more yellow. And so that's basically how you do it. You just keep tweaking the different colors until they are looking the way you want. So that all looks basically black and yellow. That's where we want it. That's how I change the color of a lot of stuff. We'll delete that, go back to what we had. So I made that a layer, gave it a radial blur, so it looks like it's kind of zooming in. And then I put a gradient shadow coming from the bottom up. So you just use the gradient layer, hold shift, and then drag up, and that's what you'll get. So then I brushed in sort of a shadow right here, which will be behind the cutouts, just to give it some separation from the background. And then I had some pictures of some sparks that I found online, put those into different places to make it look like they were coming off of the lights that are on the background. Then I found this cylinder, and super basic, doesn't look right at all, but we're going to change that. So first, use a curves layer to make it a lot darker, and then I put a texture over top, set to screen, and then just tweak the fill, and use a layer mask so it only affects this side of the cylinder, not the top, as you can see right here. And we did that because the texture is flat to the side, so it looks more accurate on this side, but not necessarily on the top. And then did the same thing for the top, and only did it to the top. And then what I did there was just stretch the texture down. So as you can see, for the top layer, I take it from this down to here, and that makes the look a little more accurate. So then I found this picture online. So that's what it looks like normally. And what we did was put a clipping mask onto the object below, double click the side, and then just dragged out the dark areas. So that's what it looks like. Kind of cool, but just wanted to make it look like they were kind of like laser lights going across the actual thing. That's a little bit too harsh of an effect, so drag that down. It leaves the light areas and takes away the dark areas. Then I brushed out this middle portion, and then use a curves layer to brighten up the front middle of the cylinder. And then I just tweaked that whole thing to be a little more yellow with the hue saturation layer. So I used his cutout as a reflection, and we just used a puppet warp to match his feet up to his actual feet. Then I used his curves layer just to contrast the cylinder look a little bit more, and one more selective color to get like the final look that I wanted on the cylinder. Then I just used a gradient shadow from the bottom up to darken that up, and a gradient shadow from the back to darken up the back. And then one more curves layer to brighten up just the front middle. So then I had a reflection of the cutouts in the back as well. Can't even really tell what they're doing, but just thought I would add it in for a little bit more accuracy and detail. Then we have a drop shadow of this cutout, and I just kind of brush that in, set to linear burn, and just gives him some depth from the background. So I use a selective color to tweak his skin tones and the look of his uniform, which I really like a lot. I tried to use like a sort of a teal texture on all the grays, and I think it like worked out really well. And then I used this orange color that I got from here to set it to linear dodge and just do a soft brush onto him where the light would be hitting him in different areas. So you can see that in all these different areas, and you just do that where basically like the light would be affected. Then we have the next drop shadow that is for this cutout. Again, both of these cutouts had a motion blur on them, which gave it a little more dynamic of a look. So like his hands are like pretty still right there, but because he's like fairly still and his hands are in motion, I decided to put a blur on his hands to make it look like they're actually clapping, which I love doing little stuff like that. Gives it an extra something. Did the same thing to his hand raising up on this side just to give it a little bit of motion. Again, you can see the brush on the smart filter right here to only affect a certain part of the image. And then I use a similar selective color on him to try and get that same look. So here I just am taking out the green on that guy's, taking out the green on the ref's armband. And then I just decided to take away all the color of the ref just to make him look like a background character. He's not important, so we kind of just want to like take away anything that's going to distract people from John John. Then I did the same thing with this glow layer, linear dodge add, just an orange fill and just brushed in right here where that light would be hitting him. Super simple. Then we have a shadow for the front cutout, and here I used a metal sort of like scrap metal texture, as you can see, and then just darken it up to contrast against the words. Gave it sort of like a dark overlay. I think it's just black. Yeah, set to 50%. So pretty dark to contrast against the white words that I'm going to put on it. It's just his name and his weight. And I thought the like grunge with the metal look just kind of was fitting for wrestling. So then I have the feet shadows, which are just black soft brushes. You can paint them in, and his drop shadow for his main cutout, which is right there. As you can see, his main cutout is a little bit off color, so we definitely needed to tweak that. So I've got a selective color right here, just kind of tweak that whole look to give that gray, the more of a gray teal look, and tweak him and his skin tones to be a little bit more like these other two guys, and it was still just a little bit too saturated, so I came and put in a hue saturation layer and just desaturated his skin tones to match the bad guys, because I think the picture in general at first was just too saturated, so desaturated that. Then I painted in with a linear dodge fill again, this orange color around his legs and feet where these lights would be hitting him, which is the same texture again that I just pulled up here and set the linear dodge add, tweak the color, tweak the brightness of it. So basically just use a curves layer to pull down the dark, kind of only leaving the lightest areas, which that just looks kind of more cluttered. Now it looks a little bit more clean right there. So then it makes sense with like the light hitting him on the legs with this layer. And then I add in a little bit more of that same texture, color dodge, just to give it a little more pop. I liked how that looked. And then just brushed away sort of the outer edges so it only really is popping in here and a little bit right here. Then we have the All-American text, which I brought in, tweaked it, and put a texture on the outside edges, and then just made the main yellow, made the inside look yellow with a gradient overlay and then an inner glow. So pretty simple there. Then I used this texture to go on top of all that, and that's sort of what it looks like originally. So turn it to soft light and then just put it on just the text. And I thought it just gave the words a little grungy look like the rest of the graphic. So I thought that matched up pretty well. So then I added in this 2-time text right here, converted that to a shape, which you just right click on it, convert to shape, and then when you do that, you can go over here, click on the shapes. So like any of these shapes, you just click on this. You can go up here and add a stroke. So I added a stroke of 5. You got to make sure it's not clear. You gotta make sure it's actually on a color. For me, I use the same color I was already using. And then I just put a yellow bevel look on that to make that text look 3D as well. And then over top of the whole thing, I put this orange glow set to screen with the 80% fill, and just brushed it in where the lights were, where I like wanted it to pop, kind of the top of these words, these different light sources, and right around here. And you can kind of feel that out. Do what you want. And then I put on our color correction and then tweaked it to be a little bit less orangey red and more yellow. And then I did the Control-Shift-Alt-E, which stamps everything and makes a layer out of it. And then I used that layer, went up here to image and did apply image, and that makes this. And so I set that one to 35% and then put one on top and set that to screen and then put a blur on it. That's what that looks like originally if it's set to screen with a blur on it. And then I just brushed that in where I wanted it to be. So as you can see, this is where I like brushed in the different glowy effects. Basically the same places I brushed brushed in the orange effect down here, just the light sources and that sort of thing. And then one last selective color to tweak the red and orangeness and make it a little more yellow. And then we just have the App State Wrestling logo up top with a gradient on that to make it pop a little more. If you want access to Photoshop files like this one and want to go through them yourself, check out my Patreon. And if you enjoyed this video and learned something, feel free to check out this next video.